Imagine getting a $250 fine for parking in your own driveway. Sounds insane, right? Well, that's exactly what happened to me when my HOA president, let's just call her Karen, decided she could make up rules out of thin air. She thought I'd roll over and pay up. But what happened next completely backfired on her. Stick around, because this story has drama, revenge, and the ultimate HOA takedown you won't want to miss. You won't believe this. That was the first thought running through my head when I opened the envelope for my homeowners association, or HOA. Inside was a letter that left me speechless. You're being fined $250 for parking your vehicle in your driveway. Yes, you heard that right. I was being fined for parking in my own driveway. At first, I thought it was a mistake. Maybe they had mixed up the addresses or confused me with a neighbor. But no, it had my name, my house number, and even a picture of my car parked neatly in my driveway. The letter was signed by the HOA president, who everyone in the neighborhood knew as Karen. And trust me, she lived up to the name. Karen was infamous for nitpicking every little thing in our community. The wrong shade of beige on your fence? Fine. Trash getting out 10 minutes early? Fine. Lawn an inch too long? Fine. But this was ridiculous. I wasn't about to just pay a fine for something so absurd. So the next day, I marched right up to the HOA office to talk to Karen directly. She was sitting behind her desk, sipping on some overpriced latte, and smirking like she had just won a battle. "Hi, Karen," I started politely. "I got this notice about a fine for parking in my own driveway. That has to be a mistake, right?" Karen adjusted her glasses and, with the most smug tone imaginable, said, "No mistake. Driveways in this community are not meant for parking overnight. They must remain clear at all times. It's in the HOA rules." I pulled out my copy of the HOA handbook, flipped through it right there in front of her, and said, "Funny, because I don't see anything about that rule in here." Karen's face tightened. She wasn't expecting me to come prepared. But instead of admitting she was wrong, she leaned back and said, "Well, maybe the rule hasn't been updated in your copy, but it's definitely in effect. Pay the fine or face additional penalties." At that moment, I realized this wasn't about rules. This was about power. Karen liked controlling people, and I wasn't about to let her get away with it. That night, I decided to do some digging. I went online and pulled up the official HOA bylaws filed with the county. Guess what? There was no mention whatsoever about driveways needing to stay empty. The only rule was that cars couldn't block sidewalks or be left on the street for more than 48 hours. And my car? It was parked perfectly, not blocking anything. But I didn't stop there. I started asking my neighbors if they had ever been fined for parking in their driveways. Most of them said no. But a few admitted that Karen had warned them about it before, scaring them into compliance. That's when I realized Karen was just making up her own rules, probably hoping people wouldn't question her. So I gathered everything, screenshots of the bylaws, photos of my car, and even testimony from neighbors. I was ready for battle. The next HOA board meeting was just a week away, and you better believe I showed up, binder in hand. The room was packed with homeowners, most of them already frustrated with Karen's constant nitpicking. When it came time for community concerns, I raised my hand. "I'd like to talk about the fine I received for parking in my own driveway," I said loud enough for everyone to hear. Heads immediately turned, and a few neighbors even nodded, like they knew exactly what I was talking about. Karen tried to cut me off, saying, "This isn't the right time," but I kept going. According to the HOA bylaws, which are legally filed with the county, there is no rule against parking in one's own driveway. I have a copy right here. I placed the binder on the table and flipped it open for everyone to see. Karen's face turned red, and she started fidgeting with her papers. I continued. "Not only that, but several of my neighbors have said they've been threatened with the same bogus rule. That's abuse of power. And if this fine isn't dropped immediately, I'll have no choice but to escalate this to the county and possibly even pursue legal action." The room erupted. Neighbors started speaking up one after another. "Yeah, she fined me for the color of my mailbox. She told me my garden gnome was a violation. I'm sick of this nonsense." Karen was cornered. The other board members, who had clearly been afraid of her before, finally spoke up too. One of them said, "He's right. That rule doesn't exist. This fine should never have been issued." In the end, not only was my fine dropped, but a board voted to officially reprimand Karen for abusing her position. They even scheduled a special election to replace her as HOA president. And guess what? A month later, Karen was voted out. The neighborhood practically threw a party. Since then, things have been so much more peaceful. No more nitpicky fines, no more bogus rules. People could finally enjoy their homes without fear of being targeted. As for me, every time I pull into my driveway, I can't help but smile, because that's the spot where I stood my ground and where Karen's reign of petty power came to an end. And that's how Karen learned the hard way that you can't just make up rules and bully neighbors. Justice was served, and my driveway is still my driveway. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit that like button. It really helps out the channel. Subscribe and turn on the bell so you don't miss the next crazy HOA story. And hey, drop a comment below. Have you ever dealt with a power-hungry HOA or a neighborhood Karen? I'd love to hear your stories.